I was just her boring husband until I turned her promotion gala into my explosive exit and reclaimed my life with a ruthless public transformation. The sound of champagne glasses clinking and corporate laughter echoed through the hotel ballroom as I stood there, frozen in disbelief. "Oh, this is just my boring husband," she said with that dismissive wave of her hand, not even bothering to mention my name to her new regional director. The conversation quickly shifted to quarterly projections and potential promotions while I was left clutching my drink, suddenly invisible in a sea of power suits and ambition. 15 years together, and this is what I had become. A footnote in her biography, not even worthy of a proper introduction. The worst part wasn't the humiliation. It was realizing this had been happening for years, and I had allowed it. Each dismissive comment, each eye roll when I spoke about my day at the accounting firm, each not now when I suggested weekend plans. The evidence had been mounting, but tonight made it undeniably clear. We drove home in silence that night. She was busy texting about some crisis at work, completely unaware of the seismic shift that had just occurred in my consciousness. Our suburban house looked different as we pulled into the driveway. No longer a home, but a museum of compromises I had made, dreams I had deferred, and the slow erosion of my identity. As she went straight to her home office, I wandered into our bedroom and stared at the man in the mirror, slightly overweight, graying at the temples, with posture that screamed defeat. The safe, predictable husband who always paid the bills on time, who never complained when dinner plans were canceled, who had become so pathetically reliable that I had rendered myself obsolete in her eyes. That night, sleep evaded me. Instead, my mind raced with memories of who I used to be, the college rock climber with dreams of starting my own adventure travel company, the guy who once spontaneously drove 8 hours to see a concert, the man who had fire in his eyes. Where had he gone? And more importantly, could he be resurrected? Morning came, and with it a strange calm settled over me. I watched her rush through her morning routine, designer bag in one hand, protein shake in the other. "I'll be late tonight," she announced, not asked. "Big presentation tomorrow." I nodded and smiled, the dutiful husband performing his expected role. But something had shifted inside me. This would be the last time I played this part without a script of my own writing. The moment the door closed behind her, I opened my laptop and created a new document titled Exit Strategy. This wasn't about revenge. This was about reclamation. If I was going to leave this marriage, it wouldn't be with a whimper of defeat, but with a declaration of my resurrection. She thought I was boring. I would show her, and everyone else, just how exciting my exit could be. First step, financial independence. I began cataloging our assets, identifying what was legally mine, researching accounts that couldn't be traced. Second, identity rebirth. I made a list of all the adventures I had postponed, the skills I had wanted to learn, the places I had dreamed of seeing. Third, and most importantly, absolute secrecy. This metamorphosis would happen right under her nose, but she would be too busy climbing her corporate ladder to notice the butterfly emerging from the chrysalis she had taken for granted. For the next several weeks, I maintained the facade of normalcy. I prepared her favorite meals when she came home exhausted. I listened attentively to her work stories. I played the role of the boring husband to perfection. But each day, while she conquered her corporate world, I was methodically planning my liberation. The irony wasn't lost on me. Her dismissal had finally freed me from seeking her approval. Her words had broken something irreparable, but from those fragments I was building something new, something she would never see coming until it was too late. The clock was ticking on my ordinary existence, and the countdown to my extraordinary exit had begun. The first rule of disappearing is to do it in plain sight. While she climbed corporate rungs, I began my parallel life with surgical precision. Each morning after she left, I transformed into someone else entirely. My first stop was a private bank 40 miles away, where I opened an account under my legal name but with a different address, a P.O. box I had quietly secured. Small transfers, nothing suspicious enough to trigger notifications. Financial freedom requires patience. Within 3 weeks, I had moved 20% of my personal savings. The joint accounts remained untouched. This wasn't about stealing, it was about separating. Meanwhile, I sold some long-held investments and stock options from my company, converting them to assets she couldn't track. The boring accountant knew exactly how to move money without raising red flags. The physical transformation began next. I joined a gym far from our neighborhood and hired a personal trainer who didn't ask questions when I said I wanted a complete body overhaul in 6 months. The soreness was excruciating at first, my body protesting years of neglect. But pain became my companion, reminding me I was still capable of feeling something intense. "You've lost weight," she noted one evening, barely looking up from her tablet. "New diet at work," I replied casually. She nodded, satisfied with the simple explanation, and returned to her emails. If she had looked closer, she might have noticed the changing definition in my arms, the straightening of my posture, the new fire in my eyes. But she had long ago stopped really seeing me. Weekends became my training grounds while she worked overtime. I drove 2 hours to a small airfield where I began taking flying lessons. The instructor was puzzled why a mild-mannered accountant suddenly wanted to pilot a plane. "Midlife crisis," I explained with a smile. He laughed, unaware how accurate, yet insufficient, that label was. The freedom of being airborne matched the growing lightness in my soul. Next came the rock climbing lessons I had abandoned decades earlier. My hands blistered and bled as they remembered old passions. I purchased wilderness survival courses online, studying them late into the night while she slept beside me, oblivious to the man who was disappearing right next to her. Our social interactions became fascinating experiments. At the rare dinner parties we both attended, I watched her introduce me with the same dismissive wave. "He keeps the bills paid," she would joke to her colleagues. They would laugh, and now I would join them, amusing myself with the knowledge of my secret metamorphosis. Behind the scenes, I had begun applying for remote accounting positions with international firms. My resume, updated for the first time in years, reflected the competent professional I had always been, the one she had reduced to boring for her own narrative. 3 interviews later, I had secured a position with a European company willing to let me work from anywhere with an internet connection. The most surreal moment came when she brought home the invitation to her company's annual gala 3 months away. "You'll need to rent a tux," she said, sliding the embossed card across the kitchen counter. I picked it up, studying the elaborate design. The date circled in my mind for entirely different reasons than she assumed. "It will be a night to remember," I replied, a statement that made her smile with professional anticipation. Each night, I added details to my exit strategy document, now encrypted and stored on a private server. The plan was evolving from a fantasy of escape into a masterpiece of reinvention. I researched countries with favorable expat conditions, locations where her corporate connections couldn't reach. I studied languages online with headphones, while she thought I was watching mindless television shows. The most dangerous moment came when her sister dropped by unexpectedly one Saturday while she was at an emergency meeting. I had just returned from a skydiving lesson, my hair still wind-blown, eyes bright with adrenaline. "You look different," she remarked suspiciously. I shrugged it off, claiming a long walk in the park. Her eyes narrowed slightly, but she didn't press further. That night, I accelerated my timeline. Close calls could not become complications. As winter turned to spring, my boring cocoon was nearly shed. The butterfly was almost ready to emerge, wings dried and strengthened by the heat of my quiet determination. The countdown to the gala, and my grand exit, continued. 62 days remained before the world would see who I had become while no one was watching. Fortune favors the prepared, but sometimes it also offers unexpected gifts. 40 days before the gala, while browsing an entrepreneur forum under my new email identity, I received a message that changed everything. An old college roommate, someone I hadn't spoken to in nearly 20 years, had recognized my username from a comment I'd made about financial structures for adventure tourism companies. We met at a coffee shop 3 towns over. The years had been kind to him. Success had given him confidence without arrogance. When he asked what I'd been doing, I gave him the truth, not the sanitized version my wife had grown accustomed to dismissing, but my actual ambitions, my exit strategy, my rebirth. "I'm opening a branch office in New Zealand next month," he said after listening intently. "The accounting team I hired just backed out. The position is yours if you want it, remote at first, then on location once you're established." He slid a business card across the table with a number scribbled on the back. The salary was twice what I currently made. The location was precisely where I had planned to disappear to. The timing was perfect. That night, she brought home expensive takeout, and better news, she was being considered for the executive position she'd been chasing for years. I watched her celebrate, pouring champagne with one hand while checking emails with the other. "This changes everything for us," she declared, using the word us for the first time in months. "Absolutely it does," I agreed, toasting her success with genuine appreciation for the irony. Her promotion would be announced at the same gala where I planned my exit. The symmetry was almost poetic. The physical transformation accelerated as the date approached. My trainer commented that he'd never seen someone so dedicated. My body had shed 30 pounds, replaced by lean muscle and stamina I hadn't possessed even in my 20s. I purchased an entirely new wardrobe in secret, storing it in a rented storage unit along with my new passport, international driver's license, and the other necessities for my new life. 29 days before the gala, she hosted a dinner party for her department heads. I played my role flawlessly, the supportive spouse, making appropriate jokes, refilling wine glasses, disappearing when business talk began. But this time I observed everything with new eyes. The way she positioned herself as the center of every interaction, the casual diminishment of others' accomplishments to heighten her own. The performance was familiar, but I was no longer its captive audience. Later that night, one of her colleagues cornered me in the kitchen. "How do you do it?" he asked, slightly drunk and conspiratorial. Being married to someone so intense, the question caught me off guard, not because it was unexpected, but because for the first time I wasn't defensive. "Practice," I replied with a genuine smile and knowing when to fold. He assumed I meant knowing when to concede an argument. I meant knowing when to walk away from the table entirely. The following weekend, she left for a business retreat. With the house to myself, I finalized every detail. The international bank accounts were established. The apartment in Auckland was leased, first payment transferred. The resignation letter to my firm was drafted, set to be delivered electronically minutes after my exit. Everything was in place except for the grand finale itself. The most surreal aspect was watching her prepare for the gala, completely unaware it represented two drastically different futures colliding. She bought a new designer dress, scheduled appointments for hair and makeup. I quietly had my new tuxedo tailored, not the rental she expected, ensuring it fit my transformed physique perfectly. 17 days before the event, during a rare shared breakfast, she mentioned off-handedly that the regional director had specifically asked if I would be attending. "He probably wants to make sure all the spouses are there for the executive announcement," she explained, scrolling through her phone. "Just smile and try to seem interested in the conversations." The casual condescension stung less now. Each dismissive comment simply reinforced the righteousness of my decision. The final piece fell into place 1 week before the gala. The small tech company I had contracted created exactly what I needed: a digital presentation that would activate remotely from my phone. The content was prepared, timed perfectly, impossible to shut down once initiated. The technical specialist whistled when I explained what I wanted. "Whoever this is for, you must really want to make an impression." "Just correcting the record," I replied, transferring the final payment. As the countdown reached single digits, a strange calm settled over me. The nervous energy of planning gave way to the quiet certainty of execution. 3 days, 2 days, 1 day. The morning of the gala arrived, and with it the last sunrise of my old life. By this time tomorrow, the boring husband would cease to exist. In his place would stand a man reclaiming everything he had surrendered: his dignity, his dreams, and the right to write his own story. The morning of the gala brought an unexpected tension, not from anxiety about my plans, but from the eerie calm that precedes momentous change. I prepared breakfast as usual while she rushed through her morning routine, already on 3 calls before finishing her coffee. The ordinary rhythm of our household continued, oblivious to its imminent disruption. "I'll meet you there," she announced, gathering her portfolio. "I need to check the venue setup and make sure everything's perfect for the announcement." I nodded agreeably, playing my part one final time. As the door closed behind her, I allowed myself a moment of reflection in the sudden silence of our home. 15 years of memories surrounded me, some genuinely happy, others tainted by the slow decay of mutual respect. I felt no hatred, only a profound certainty that we had reached an irrevocable conclusion. The hours that followed unfolded according to my meticulous schedule. First, the secure transfers of my remaining personal assets to untraceable accounts. Then the final confirmation of my flight departing at midnight. A red-eye to Los Angeles, then connecting internationally while the gala's aftermath was still unfolding. The luggage had already been sent ahead. Everything I deemed essential for my new beginning was waiting at my destination. My phone buzzed with a message from her. "Wear the blue tie. It matches the company colors." Even in her momentous hour, she was concerned with appearances, with how I would complement her narrative. I replied with a simple thumbs-up emoji, perhaps the last communication in our marriage that wouldn't be mediated by attorneys. At precisely 3 o'clock, I contacted the tech specialist who would be stationed near the gala's audiovisual control room. All systems were prepared, synchronized with my phone, untraceable. Once activated, the presentation would upload, timed to the second, impossible to interrupt without cutting power to the entire venue. Technology can be so accommodating when properly motivated. The transformation ritual began at 4 o'clock. The shower, the precise grooming, the calculated choices for cologne and accessories. The tuxedo, not the rental she expected, but a custom piece that accentuated my new physique, lay waiting on the bed. With each element of preparation, I shed another layer of the man she had dismissed so casually. Before leaving, I placed 3 envelopes on her vanity. The first contained the legal paperwork initiating our separation, already filed electronically that morning. The second held a detailed accounting of our financial situation, transparent and fair despite the circumstances. The third contained a single page, not an apology, not a recrimination, but a simple acknowledgement that some stories must end for others to begin. The gala venue gleamed with excessive opulence. Crystal chandeliers, ice sculptures, the trappings of corporate success designed to justify the sacrifices demanded. I arrived precisely on schedule, nodding to familiar faces, playing the supportive spouse role one final time. Several guests did double takes as they recognized me. Their confusion at my physical transformation was evident but unspoken. She was surrounded by executives when I approached, radiant with anticipation of her triumph. Her eyes widened slightly at my appearance. Perhaps the first time in months she had truly seen me. "You look different," she remarked, surprise momentarily piercing her professional composure. "Thank you," I replied simply, accepting a champagne flute from a passing server. "Tonight is about transformation after all." The comment slid past her as the company president approached, and she seamlessly shifted into networking mode. I circulated through the crowd, exchanging pleasantries, laying the groundwork for what would follow. The tech specialist caught my eye from across the room, giving an imperceptible nod. Everything was in place. Dinner passed in a blur of performative corporate camaraderie. My position at her side felt increasingly surreal, occupying physical space while already emotionally departed. The company president rose for announcements, and the room hushed in anticipation. As expected, her promotion was announced to enthusiastic applause. She rose, moved to the podium, and began her carefully rehearsed speech about loyalty, perseverance, and the support system that made success possible. "And I must acknowledge my husband," she said, turning to gesture toward me with that familiar dismissive wave. "Always dependable, always there." The moment had arrived. As she continued speaking, I removed my phone from my pocket and pressed a single button. 3 seconds later, the massive screen behind her flickered, interrupting her mid-sentence. Her confusion turned to alarm as the presentation began. Not the corporate logo she expected, but something else entirely. The countdown to my new life had reached 0. The butterfly was about to spread its wings, and no one in that room would ever again describe me as boring. The screen behind her flashed to life with 3 simple words in elegant font: "The boring husband." A confused murmur rippled through the audience as she turned to see what had interrupted her moment of triumph. Her face registered confusion, then dawning horror as she connected the title to her own dismissive introduction months earlier. The presentation continued, professional and polished, narrated by my recorded voice, calm, confident, unrecognizable to most in attendance. First came a split screen of before and after images. The soft, defeated man she had married versus the transformed individual standing in the room. Gasps echoed through the ballroom. For 15 years, my recorded voice explained over footage of me piloting a small aircraft. I diminished myself to accommodate someone else's narrative. Tonight, that story ends. The screen displayed my skydiving certification, then transitioned to footage of me free-falling through clouds. Face exhilarated, unrecognizable from the man she had dismissed so casually. She stepped away from the podium, moving toward me with panic in her eyes. Security personnel looked uncertainly between her and the presentation, unsure whether to intervene. The company president remained frozen in his seat, champagne glass suspended halfway to his lips. The presentation continued methodically, displaying financial charts documenting my separate success, investments she never knew about, the new position waiting halfway across the world. While being introduced as just the boring husband, I was building a life you never bothered to ask about. Then came the most devastating sequence, a compilation of recordings, each showing her introducing me with the same dismissive wave, the same belittling words at different events over the years. Each instance played one after another, creating an undeniable pattern that made several guests shift uncomfortably in their seats. The room grew painfully silent except for the audio from the presentation. I remained standing calmly at my table, making no move to stop the display or to approach her. This wasn't about confrontation, it was about reclamation, about showing everyone, including myself, the disparity between perception and reality. The final slide displayed my new company's logo alongside my position and contact information, all under my name, which she had so often failed to mention when introducing me. Effective immediately. The narration concluded as the screen showed a countdown timer set to 60 seconds. She reached me then, voice hushed but frantic. "What are you doing? This is my night. You're embarrassing us both." "No," I replied, maintaining perfect composure. "I'm introducing myself properly, perhaps for the first time in our marriage." The countdown continued on screen. 50 seconds. 40. The whispers around us grew louder as guests processed what was happening. Her colleagues watched with undisguised fascination as the power dynamic between us visibly shifted. "Whatever you're upset about, we can discuss this at home," she hissed, professional smile strained to breaking point. "There is no more home," I said simply. "The papers were filed this morning. My flight leaves at midnight. This is goodbye." The timer reached 20 seconds. The regional director, the one she had first introduced me to as just my boring husband at the event that catalyzed everything, was now watching intently, reassessing me with new eyes. "You can't just leave," she said, desperation replacing anger. "We built a life together." "No," I corrected gently. "You built a career. I maintained a facade. There's a difference." 10 seconds remained on the countdown. I straightened my custom tuxedo jacket and offered one last genuine smile. "I wish you well with your promotion. You've earned it. But I've earned this too." The timer hit 0, and on cue, the emergency exit door behind me opened, revealing my prearranged transportation waiting outside. I placed my wedding ring on the table, turned without further comment, and walked steadily toward the exit. Behind me, chaos erupted as the presentation screen displayed one final message. "The boring husband has left the building." The door closed behind me, muffling the commotion as I stepped into the warm night air and my waiting future. The driver nodded as I settled into the back seat. "Airport?" he confirmed. "Yes," I replied, watching the venue recede in the rear window. "I have a plane to catch." The car pulled away from the curb, carrying me toward international departures and the life I had methodically constructed while no one was watching. The butterfly had finally emerged from its chrysalis, leaving the cocoon behind. 6 months can change everything. Auckland greeted me with breathtaking landscapes and the promise of reinvention. The small cottage I had rented near the coast became my sanctuary. Simple, functional, authentically mine. My work with the adventure tourism company flourished. My financial expertise proved invaluable as they expanded operations throughout the South Pacific. Colleagues who knew nothing of my past saw me only as I was now, competent, adventurous, fully present. The aftermath of my exit played out largely through third parties. My attorney reported that she had initially threatened legal action for public humiliation, then shifted to demanding explanations before finally accepting the generous settlement terms. Our house sold quickly, the proceeds divided according to the agreement. The divorce finalized with surprising efficiency, perhaps because she recognized the futility of fighting what had already so thoroughly ended. Social media provided occasional glimpses into the ripple effects. Her promotion remained intact, though office gossip suggested the narrative had shifted. Being abandoned so spectacularly by the husband she had dismissively referenced had become an uncomfortable footnote in her professional story. Several mutual acquaintances reached out with messages ranging from admiration to disapproval. I responded to none of them. The past deserved neither justification nor defense. My transformation continued in this new environment. Weekends were spent hiking volcanic trails, learning to sail in crystal waters, and building connections with people who accepted me at face value. Dating again proved surprisingly uncomplicated when approached with complete honesty. "I'm recently divorced and rebuilding," I would explain on the occasional dinner with interesting women. This version of me is still relatively new. Most appreciated the transparency, even if it didn't always lead to second dates. The irony wasn't lost on me. In finally prioritizing my own narrative, I had become genuinely interesting to others. Colleagues sought my perspective in meetings. New friends invited me to events. The boring husband label had been not just rejected, but thoroughly disproven. The most unexpected development came during a business conference in Sydney. My company had sent me to represent our financial projections for potential investors. After my presentation, while navigating the networking reception, I turned at the sound of a familiar voice. There she stood, clearly as shocked to see me as I was to encounter her. "I didn't know you would be here," she said, composure slightly fractured. Her eyes catalogued the changes, the confident posture, the lean physique maintained through regular climbing expeditions, the easy authority I now carried. "Last-minute addition to the delegation," I explained calmly. "Your company expanding to the Pacific Rim?" "Yes," she nodded, struggling to reconcile the man before her with the husband she had dismissed. "I'm leading the international division now." "Congratulations," I replied sincerely. "You'll do well here." An uncomfortable silence stretched between us, filled with unasked questions. Finally, she ventured, "You seem happy." "I am," I confirmed. No triumph in my voice, just simple acknowledgement of truth. "I've had a lot of time to think about what happened," she continued, lowering her voice, "about how things ended, about my role in it. It needed to end," I said gently. "We both deserve different stories than the one we were telling." Her professional mask slipped momentarily, revealing genuine regret. "I didn't see you, not for years. I'm sorry for that. I didn't let myself be seen," I countered. "That's on me. But now we both have clarity." The conversation might have continued, but a colleague approached needing my input on investor questions. I excused myself with a nod, leaving her standing alone at the edge of the reception. No dramatic confrontation, no recriminations. Just two people acknowledging the distance they had traveled from their shared past. Later that night, looking out over Sydney Harbor from my hotel room, I reflected on the encounter. There was no residual anger, no desire for reconciliation, only appreciation for the journey that had led me here. Sometimes the most meaningful departures aren't about escaping something toxic, but about making space for something authentic. The morning brought an email from her, brief, professional, acknowledging our changed circumstances and wishing me well in my new life. I replied with equal brevity and sincerity, then turned my attention to the day ahead. The past no longer required my energy. The present and future held too much promise to look backward. My phone chimed with a reminder about tomorrow's helicopter tour of the volcanic formations. Another adventure added to my expanding life. The boring husband had completed his spectacular exit. The man who replaced him was just getting started. 6 months have passed since that night, and sometimes I still wake up expecting to hear the familiar click of her heels on the hardwood floor, the impatient rattle of her car keys, the silence that always followed. Instead, I wake to the sound of waves make when they reach the volcanic black sand outside my cottage, steady, indifferent, alive. That sound has become the metronome of my new life. I thought freedom would feel like triumph. I expected to stand on some metaphorical mountaintop, chest swollen with vindication, shouting into the wind that I had won. But victory, it turns out, is quieter than revenge. It feels like the first breath after years of holding it in without realizing you were suffocating. There are moments when the old shame still flickers. I catch myself wondering if I was too cruel, too theatrical, too proud. Did I really need to burn the bridge so spectacularly? Then I remember the way she waved me away like a minor inconvenience in front of hundreds of people who mattered to her. And I realized the fire wasn't meant to hurt her. It was meant to cauterize the wound inside me that had been bleeding for 15 years. Some injuries only stop hurting when you finally let them scar. I don't hate her. That's the strangest part. Hatred would have been easier, it would have kept the story simple. Instead, I feel something closer to sorrow. Not for the marriage we lost, but for the version of us that might have existed, if either of us had been brave enough to speak the truth sooner. I mourn the man I allowed myself to become as much as I mourn the woman she turned into. We didn't destroy each other on purpose. We just slowly, politely, lethally stopped choosing each other every single day until there was nothing left to choose. And yet, I am grateful to her. That single dismissive sentence, "my boring husband," was the slap I needed to wake up. Without it, I might have died in that life, still smiling, still accommodating, still disappearing one compromise at a time. She gave me the gift of absolute clarity. I was too cowardly to find on my own, I will never send her a thank you note, but every time I jump out of a plane or climb a ridge at sunrise or laugh with people who actually see me, I send that gratitude into the universe anyway. These days, when someone asks how I'm doing, I no longer say fine. I say alive, and I mean it with every cell in my body. I am alive in a way I forgot was possible. I am terrified sometimes, exhilarated most of the time, and occasionally lonely in a clean, honest way that has nothing to do with being unseen. Loneliness now feels like spaciousness, room for whatever wants to grow next. I used to think dignity was something quiet and stoic. Now I know it can be loud when it needs to be. It can wear a custom tuxedo and walk out of a ballroom while the screen behind it burns with truth. It can also be soft, like forgiving yourself at 3 a.m. for all the years you betrayed your own dreams just to keep the peace. I am not the hero of this story, and I'm certainly not the villain. I'm just a man who finally decided that being loved for who I pretended to be was worse than not being loved at all. The price was high, but the alternative was slow death by erasure. So here I am, 40-something and brand new, learning how to take up space again. Learning that being seen is terrifying and necessary. Learning that the fire in my eyes never actually went out, it was just waiting for oxygen. And every morning, when the Pacific rolls in and reminds me that I am here, I whisper the same quiet promise to the man in the mirror who finally looks back at me with recognition. Never again will I let anyone, including myself, wave me away.